All right. Counselor Baumgartner.
I'm here.
All right. Patrick Hogan. All right. There's Patrick. Okay, good. And then Planning Commissioner Watton.
Here.
All right. I think that captures everybody. James.
Chair Manning.
All right, thank you very much.
Chair Manning, I just want to interject that we are recording and streaming.
Thank you, Lynn. So approval of the meeting minutes of meeting number 4, the summary notes of 9/5/2004. We need a motion for that.
I move to approve.
All right.
Second.
All
Mary,
right,
second.
all in favor? Thank you.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Yep,
All right. Thank you very much. And item number 3 is a presentation. So let's start on the final waterfront vision plan.
All right.
And
thanks, James. So Adrian has got a presentation that he's going to go through with the group for final comments on the final draft vision plan.
Great, thanks. So Anju just shared the screen here, so hopefully folks are seeing that. Please raise your hand if you're not. We wanted to start this item and just go through the changes that we made to the final waterfront vision plan. So since the last iteration that you saw, that we had some follow-up. There was a whole follow-up process around another survey that the city had sent out to the public to get opinions on the revisions to the vision plan, and we'll go through those results straight after this as well. But we incorporated the feedback we heard from that, as well as specific comments from this group and from follow-up meetings with some of the key property owners and other key partners, and comments that we received back specifically from that outreach as well. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time just going through where the key changes were in the vision plan with you all. And we have put together a summary document that shows all of the different changes that were made to the document that was sent out along with the final vision plan. So maybe, Anju, if you want to go to the next slide, we'll start going through those. So the way that we've organized this is I'll just go through these and they sort of go in page order. And you're welcome to maybe open up the vision plan on your own screen if you have the capability to do that and you want to follow along on the specific pages. But I wanted to talk through some of these changes. So the first real notable change was in the guiding principles. That was on page 11 and 12. We removed reference to the paper mill from the guiding principles, just given the recent changes to its status. We also updated the language, and you'll see this throughout the document, the language related to adaptive reuse of existing buildings, and that's particularly related to buildings on the island. After hearing comments and having follow-up conversations, there's concern around a lot of the state of those buildings and their seismic capacity and basically the cost to be able to retrofit those buildings. And so we didn't want to set unrealistic expectations on the reuse specifically of those buildings. So we changed that language more to be around site adaptation and reuse of materials. So there might be like components of those buildings, or there might be elements that sort of reflect those buildings or the uses that were there previously. And then lastly, we got a lot of comments around the way that we had framed the reopening of the locks. I think our phrasing previously had been more around like access to the river instead of really being around the opportunities for river transportation and the use of those locks. So we sort of pivoted there and other parts of the document around being more specific around the reopening of the locks being an opportunity to move up and down the river and what that brings in terms of like transportation, recreation, economic development, other opportunities. Next slide. The key planning issues section, which is on page 18, there's some specific changes to the different districts. So in the historic City Hall district, we added more recognition of traffic congestion issues in that district, and that any of those network changes that would be needed to materialize this vision plan would obviously need to consider their impacts to I-205 and Arch Bridge traffic and how they mitigate those issues. In the Cultural Heritage District, we added more recognition of the FERC boundary. So we specifically added the FERC boundary into a few of the maps that were missing that, and strengthen the language around the need to protect the power generating resources and public safety components that come with that FERC boundary, and recognizing that there is a sort of formal approval process for any changes to public access that happen within that boundary, so that the plan's really recognizing that process. And then in the Ponds district, added or strengthened the recognition that the existing street network is narrow and lacking sidewalks in many places, and that's a shout out as much as anything to any future development that may happen in that area would need to address its access issues and not exacerbate or contribute to some fairly constrained street network elements in that district. On the next page, or the next slide, sorry. So around the design principles on page 20, the mobility and access principle, we updated that to sort of recognize that transportation infrastructure changes would be needed to support land use changes, allow access, and also address those traffic concerns that we talked about just before. For mobility and access, we added again more recognition of the opportunities that are created by reopening of the locks. And then for the environmental stewardship, recognizing the need to balance development opportunities with opportunities to restore natural areas and maintain wildlife habitats. So trying to strengthen some of that language so that that's in the plan and recognized in the design principles. For our market analysis, there were some minor tweaks to this that in the housing section, we've recognized that there might be increased potential or demand for downsized and senior housing opportunities. These are changes that were the market analysis was and so Leyland went back and just revisited some of these things and identified these tweaks to that section. For retail, recognizing the opportunity for the waterfront to really become sort of a unique retail destination, and that might include sort of more experiential kind of offerings in the retail sector. And then similar for hospitality, recognizing that this is a unique location and there may be opportunities to look at different sorts of uses that bring people to take advantage of that location. Could be small scale event venues or boutique hospitality uses, those sorts of things. The next slide. There were some changes that we made to specific district plans in the vision plan. So for the historic City Hall district, we made a more specific call out to the reuse of the historic City Hall building that's actually that's already in place. So that's more specific language. It was a bit vague before. And also just strengthen that this district is a key gateway into the cultural heritage district, and in particular needs to consider PGE's access needs to make sure that their operations are still maintained in the adjacent district. On the next slide, in the cultural heritage district, again recognizing that there's a in this district there's a bigger sort of planning process that is either being undertaken or needs to be undertaken to identify both what its access needs and its development feasibility is. So just a shout out to the fact that there is more unknowns, I guess, in that area, and it will have its own process. Again, we added the FERC boundary into this plan more specifically and what that means. And then also just bigger shout outs or recognition of, that we don't know the specifics of how access would come about to Moores Island in the future, and that would need to be determined as part of those other processes. And similarly that, part of those processes would also be to look at, specifically what future uses might be opportunities on Moores Island, and what does that mean from a rezoning perspective. And then in the Pond District, noting there that, again, a recognition that any future development would need to address those traffic and circulation access issues that we called out before. And then I think a bit of nomenclature here that we wanted to change based on some recognition from the comments we received was, I think we labeled certain areas as priority development areas, where I think the language intention should be those as potential development areas. It doesn't mean that they would necessarily develop, but they could be development opportunities in that district. And then I think lastly, and I think this was a change that was in the previous version, but wanted to again call it out to the group here, is that we had added some more detail on the housing densities section, which is page 37 and 38, in reaction to comments about, that we weren't being very specific about what is low density versus medium versus high density. And so what we did in this section was call out 3 different ranges of densities in terms of their units per acre, and tried to show a range of typical examples that included, this is an example on the screen of that sort of medium category, which would have 10 to 30 units per acre, and really trying to show that there is a fair bit of difference between what medium density can really mean, depending on the height versus the coverage of the lot, those sorts of things. So trying to show a variety of what low, medium, and high density housing types could really look like, so that we're showing that variety. I might pause there and see if there's any initial comments on some of these changes that we've made from the group. And I know the groups sort of had a fairly limited time with the updated vision plan, so feel free. I know we've received a few comments back through Darren on some various language things and some other bigger comments. Feel free as a group, feel free to again take some time to go through the changes, and if there is anything, I think at this stage we're really looking at, is there anything like big red flags or maybe something that just needs a tweak at this point. Darren, maybe this is a good opportunity to say that, you know, we've tracked the comments that we've received from both the public and from this group, and Darren's compiling that into a matrix of, you know, here's the comment we received, here's how it was addressed, or in the vision plan, or the updates to the vision plan, so that as we go forward, there's a log of those changes. Darren, did you want to mention anything more to that?
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Yeah, so we did receive quite a few comments while the survey was open in December and January. They were just emailed in to me. So again, Adrian and the team did respond to some of the comments through changes to this document here. But as Adrian said, I'm slowly working through all the comments and providing a response, and then what the outcome of the comment was. So when we get this document to the Planning Commission and Council, they'll have a whole log of all the comments that we received and how changes were made to the document based on those comments.
And James, maybe that's a good segue into the next, I think it's the next agenda item, or maybe it's a continuation of this presentation, which is the
Darren,
result.
could I comment?
Yeah, feel free.
Yep, feel free to make a comment.
This is Jim Edwards. I'm having trouble with my camera, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Adrian, I heard what you said about the of reusing structures. My search of the current version of the vision plan, industrial heritage or into guiding principles section, subsection 9, there's no reference to reusing or repurposing anything, except it stipulates site adaptation is limited to historic city hall. In the cultural heritage district, the one reference to industrial heritage minimally suggests some effort to save artifacts or buildings by the use of the term site adaptation. It is not clear to me what is meant by that term, and like reusing or repurposing some industrial buildings or artifacts included in the vision plan. Under this section regarding further studies, there's a passing reference to reuse materials to celebrate industrial heritage. There are several pictures of building concepts on that page, but not sure used to purpose structures. The vision plan has no suggestion of how the recognition celebration should be done. I think recognizing and celebrating industrial heritage should be done by reusing and repurposing some industrial structures and buildings, and that should be stated in the plan.
I think we will log that, and we'll sort of take that into consideration. Again, you know, the idea of keeping it a little bit more vague was to keep that flexibility and recognize that, you know, there are some serious, like, you know, challenges with also being able to do that, not the least of which is cost. So, you know, having that flexibility was pretty important there, but I do recognize your point.
And there are provisions in the city to protect historic buildings with the Historic Review Board and the Planning Commission and things like that also. So it doesn't directly, in my opinion, doesn't directly have to be written into this vision, because we already have some safeguards within the city to do that.
May I ask a question? This is Britta Mansfield.
Sure. Yes.
I feel like I've received some comments as well, just from the perspective of the Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area Coalition, just of the ongoing concern about historic preservation really being called out and made a priority. And I think it is a vague priority here, but I think the comments we just heard show that it could definitely be codified a little bit more. And I think even to the extent of like calling out some of the partners, the coalition is now moving into historic city halls. So some of that work to reinvigorate the area is already being done. And I think having that acknowledged and recognizing that we hope and plan to be a national heritage area within, the next, hopefully 5 years at the longest. And I think that would alleviate a lot of the concern, because that calls out a partner who's actually doing some of this preservation work. There are other partners that could be called out as well, but I think the need to be clearer on the priority of historic preservation, I think, is pretty key, and I think would be addressed a little bit more clearly without being too restrictive.
Okay.
Great.
This is Tom Watton, Planning Commission, and I'm following with what you're saying. And would it make sense to put something in there, just saying that until a site study, structural and whatever else means, is completed, that's yet to be identified what will be savable or that kind of thing. That, again, without trying to paint into a corner or being too vague, just a thought.
Great. We can definitely take these comments back and see where we might want to change things a little bit there, but keeping that flexibility. Yep.
Chair, I had a comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to, on the other side of this coin, comment that I have seen and heard input from the public also in the interest of restoring some of the original aspects and environmental view of that site. And so I just want to put that out there, that although I do hear a strong voice, and many of the people on this particular group have a strong passion about conservation of industrial history, there's also another kind of voice in this, maybe not in this call today, but that I'm hearing from the public about kind of restoring some of the natural aspect of the area. Just to kind of put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is
Hello?
Kate Brown from the Trust.
Yes.
We were, just to address some of the issues, we were concerned about the specific language that was in the original draft plan, because it gave the impression that the buildings, for example, on the site of the island, would be adapted for other reuses or other purposes. And it is my sense that the cost, whether it's seismic, ADA accessibility, flooding, makes that adaptive reuse cost prohibited. That does not mean that there isn't, frankly, an incredible opportunity to preserve historic pieces that are there. And we're obviously very interested and committed to doing that. But Actual adaptive reuse of the buildings on the island, honestly, is I'll just say fairly cost prohibitive.
But on the other side of that coin, wouldn't the cost prohibitiveness of removing all that cement and iron and all those buildings be something also? You know, I think the site study, like Mr. Watton said, might be after that site study is completed, then maybe there might be room for both of those. So at this point, you know, with Adrian and his team, I think I don't want to say vague, but it should allow for both, depending on what happens in the future with the site study. Okay. Is there any other comments before we move on to item 4? No? Okay. So let's move on to item 4. That's the Waterfront Vision Plan, January 2025 survey results.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we wanted to just bring back to the group the results from the survey that the city had put out in January that asked, how the vision plan reflected, the sort of aspirations that they had sort of previously put forward in during previous phases of public engagement. And just wanted to go through these results. We have updated the appendix, I think it's Appendix A, that is the public outreach summary to include these results, but just wanted to spend a little bit of time to go through these with the group. Andrew, if you could just go forward to the next slide. So the survey was open about 6 to 7 weeks and got 221 responses, which is pretty good response rate. From that survey, on the next screen, we had asked both a broad question around the vision plan as a whole and whether it accurately represented the priorities for the waterfront. And then we also asked that specifically for each district. As a whole, the vision plan, about 2/3 of respondents said they either somewhat or they strongly agree that the vision plan accurately represented their priorities, and approximately 29% or almost 30%, so the other third-ish, either somewhat or strongly disagreed with that statement. And there's sort of a variety of reasons for those as we were able to dive into some of the comments received. In some of those they agreed with certain districts and not others. Certain responses were related to not agreeing with certain components. So it's been interesting to be able to dive into the commentary around that and be able to reflect that in those updates that we had previously went through. So if we go through that district by district on the next couple of slides, in the historic City Hall district, about 70% of respondents indicated they agreed or somewhat or strongly agreed with the vision outline for that particular district. In the Cultural Heritage District, that was increased a little bit more, so 74-ish%, so about 3/4. And then lastly, in the Pond District, about 2/3 of respondents indicated that they somewhat or strongly agree with the vision outline in that district. So I guess all that to say that overall, the results of the survey indicated that there is strong support for what's outlined in the vision plan, and that there's also competing objectives, which we've heard throughout the process, and those came through in some of the comments that were shared as part of this. Andrew, I can't remember if there's another slide on this one. I think that might be it. So yeah, just wanted to give a high-level overview. Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to give a high-level overview of what we heard from that survey, and that generally the plan and the vision for each of the districts was pretty well supported.
Leo Groner here. What were some of the negative comments for those who strongly disagreed or somewhat disagreed with these plans?
Yeah, I think for some it was that there wasn't for some people it was the way that it was worded, if you like, that there wasn't the ability to hone in on specific elements, and they might have had something around a specific element, and those were generally what we received in terms of the comments that I was talking about, that Darren and I are compiling, how we're responding to those. So it might have been, for example, in the historic City Hall district that, generally agreed with the idea that's in there, but there wasn't enough recognition of the traffic issues or that the roadway network might have to change to accommodate that. So it was often smaller components of the bigger piece that were limiting that person from saying that they completely agreed or somewhat agreed with that. So oftentimes it was that specificity that was holding them up from making a different response.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments on this?
I think this has been mentioned. I know you're working to compile all of these comments, but will that be something that this group has access to actually see the comments that were left by people instead of just the summary? This is a helpful summary, but I think it could additionally be helpful to read some of what the community wrote.
Yeah, I'll let Darren answer if the answer is different, but intention, as he said before, is to make that comment log available as part of this, as this plan moves forward. So I don't see any reason why we can't also share that specifically with the working group.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Yeah, so we're slowly working through it, and this group will meet again in July. So hopefully we can have that comment matrix complete by then, so this group can see the full breadth of the comments. And and Adrian was correct in that. I mean, just as we heard in this discussion earlier, there's a lot of folks wanting more detail, like around preserving the structures on the island versus being more vague about what the future was. A lot of comments around potential development down in the pond district. So concerns around protection of the wetlands and the wetland buffers. So that was the two of the main focus areas that people's comments were addressing. But yes, we can get the matrix to this group for the July meeting for sure.
Thank you, Darren. Brietta brings up a great point of having the comments out in the open. Councilperson Baumgartner also said that her constituents were coming to her and talking about one angle, and Kate Brown was saying her group was coming from one angle. Is there a way to funnel those people into these comment sections also, so we can see the greater picture of this? Because as this group moves forward and we make decisions on how we want to form this, we want to do it how people want it to happen, right? Not our opinions. And at this point, sometimes the greater voice isn't being heard. That was a question for you, Darren, as far as being able to track some of these.
Yeah, so I think the comments that we've received are pretty consistent with what Governor Brown and Councilor Baumgartner are saying. that there's competing interests, competing ideas about the level of detail that needs to be in this plan. So again, I think once we get this matrix completed and out so everyone can see it and this group can see it, that you'll see the reflection of what the Governor Brown and Councilor Baumgartner are talking about, the sort of the competing interests of what people actually want to see happen there. And that's the reason, as Adrian said, we were trying to keep this flexible because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. A lot of the comments are focused on the island with the paper mill going out of business. So yeah, we'll get those comments together, and we've met with counselors, we've met with Governor Brown about their interests and what they would like to see happen. So we've been pretty thorough in our information gathering.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that would move us on to discussion number 5, policy and regulation recommendation memo.
All right, I will be walking through the next slides. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so this next section of the presentation, I'm going to walk through our preliminary high-level recommendations for updates to both the comprehensive plan and development code as they relate to the vision plan study area. So in your agenda packet you received, there should be a draft of the policy and regulatory recommendations memo that outlines the draft recommendations, and then there's an appendices that provides a backup analysis that inform those recommendations. So we'll be asking for your comments on that document. I believe we'll touch base on this in the next step slide, but in about 3 weeks, we're requesting comments back on that memo. So do please take the time to review if you haven't already. And today, again, we'll just be doing a high-level review of kind of what we're saying and proposing in that document. So as a kind of high-level foundational kind of setup for this, our analysis and recommendations are primarily focused on the historic City Hall district, as this district, as we all know, is anticipated to, some of the projects might be coming online a little bit sooner. This district presents some of the greatest opportunity for relatively unencumbered, new, higher density development. So that's really like the focus of these recommendations, but the recommendations and findings were also developed with the intention of setting a precedent for other districts as well. So let's start with the comprehensive plan. For those who might be unfamiliar with this document, just a kind of high level, what is this? The comprehensive plan is the city's official policy guide for long-term growth. And for this waterfront effort, most importantly, the plan outlines specific goals and policies for each land use designation, including those in our study area. So currently, the vision plan study area includes 3 land use designations: medium density residential in the south and north ends, commercial in the North Historic City Hall district, and then primarily industrial across the rest of the study area. So all of that purple. So when we dug a little bit deeper into the comprehensive plan and reviewed the priorities, goals, and policies for each of these 3 designations, we found that they didn't always sufficiently support the development goals outlined in the vision plan. So I'll go through each of them. So sort of like the key finding for each of these land use designations. Medium density residential. So this designation includes policies aimed at shielding residential areas from the impacts of mixed-use development, which is in direct conflict with the vision plan's goals, which actually call for a real mixed-use development, integrating housing, commercial space, and other program types. Industrial, this designation as it exists today excludes excludes housing development. So again, inconsistent with the vision plan's program goals. And then lastly, mixed use commercial. So that mixed use commercial is generally more aligned with the vision plan and supports its goals better than these other existing designations. But it still includes some language similar to medium density residential that aim to shield residential areas from commercial impacts. So the comp plan lists things like noise, lighting, privacy concerns, and we feel like these are really restrictions that are not compatible, again, with that higher density mixed use development envisioned for the historic City Hall district. So what does that mean in terms of next steps? So though the commercial mixed use does conflict with the vision plan goals, it is better aligned than other designations. So what we're recommending is that areas currently classified as medium density residential and industrial are redesignated to commercial mixed use. We're also proposing that one could establish a waterfront district designation specific to the vision plan and its study area. So this approach is modeled after the framework and guidance used for the Robin, Wood, and Bolton neighborhood plans. So those are neighborhood specific plans that have been added as a policy to the comp plan. And those neighborhood plans actually take precedence over the standard land use designation. So I know that's a little bit confusing. So we just wanted to show you kind of what that looks like in the actual comp plan. This is an existing excerpt from the policies listed within the mixed use commercial development section of the comp plan. So the policies and framework language we're referencing here is what you see highlighted. The neighborhood plan for Bolton shall guide future changes to this area. So we're proposing something similar here for what could be a waterfront district designation. So that was the comprehensive plan. Looking at the development code now. So again, at a kind of high level, the development code serves as the city's essentially zoning code. It defines allowable and conditional uses for different areas throughout the city. In the historic City Hall district, there are 3 zones: medium density residential, general commercial, and industrial. So again, mirroring the designations you see in the comprehensive plan as well. So of these, again, the general commercial zone is the least restrictive in terms of use allowances. So you can see most program types over the medium density residential and the general industrial are allowed. But there are still some constraints that limit its potential for higher density mixed use development. So notably, ground floor residential is not permitted as part of this zoning designation.
I'm sorry, could you go back one slide, please?
Yes.
What does water dependent uses mean?
Yeah, it's a little bit vague in the actual zoning code. I
If
don't want
someone
to
wanted to do a
misspeak.
marina in the
Yeah,
waterfront area, is that
right.
water dependent use?
You know, in our research, we didn't see any reference to marina in the zoning code language. So by its exclusion, I would say it's not explicitly calling out marina as an allowed program. But
yes,
Darren, yeah.
Yeah, Councilor Groner, that is a perfect example of a water dependent use as a marina. Yeah.
Why would we not want to permit a marina?
Well, at some point in the past, the one of the city councils adopted that as a prohibited use in that zone. So again, as Anju goes through the presentation, she'll hit on some recommendations on how we can potentially change the zoning in the area to be more flexible.
Thank you.
It's a great question, though. And we will come back to that. So yeah, again, some key constraints here: ground floor residential, not permitted. And there are also those height and coverage limits that really don't support the scale of development envisioned in the vision plan for the historic City Hall district. And here's a summary table illustrating those limitations, showing that in the general commercial zone, the maximum lot coverage of 50% and the height limits of 35 to 45 feet may restrict both vertical and horizontal growth in the future. So our recommendation is for the development code is to use the general commercial zone as a framework for creating a new comprehensive mixed use zone. We do just want to note that there is a mixed use transition zone that currently exists in the development code. So it's a little bit confusing, but that zone is really targeted more towards specific areas and actually limits commercial development and has even more restrictive height and coverage limits than that of the general commercial zone. So back to the new mixed use zone. Importantly, some of the things that this new zone would address is an allowance for ground floor residential in specific building types or locations, an increase in building height, coverage percentages, and floor area ratios to meet the vision plan's density targets, and encourage active street level uses and potentially implement more flexible design standards. So at a high level, that's sort of more flexible design standards. What does that mean? That might be a focus on a small set of more prescriptive requirements like building heights and setbacks, but allowing for more flexibility in things like facade articulation, roof lines, and building materials. So allowing for that flexibility could encourage a sort of creativity and contribute to a more diverse, potentially engaging built environment. So if applied more broadly beyond the historic City Hall district to other districts, the new mixed zone could include potential conditional uses like marinas, hotels, resorts, and light industrial. So that's speaking to those program types that are currently prohibited under the commercial zone. And then lastly, and importantly, we'd recommend implementing this new zone in coordination with the Willamette and Tualatin River protection overlays to provide additional environmental safeguards in sensitive and natural areas. And it's a pretty robust overlay with some pretty specific guidance. So really taking advantage of that existing overlay for this new mixed use zone. So that is very high level kind of overview of recommendations. Again, there's much more detail in the agenda packet that's provided to you, but happy to answer any questions you may have now before we get to next steps.
Okay, no questions?
I've got a question.
Okay.
That's Tom Watton. So we have another project, as most everybody knows, of Vision 43, and I know that they are a couple months ahead of us just in process, but that's how it's working out, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I know that they work with MIG as their consultants, and I was just, maybe this is for Darren or well, just one of the consultants as well, is are we taking the opportunity to work together on some of the higher density ideas and code changes that are going to be proposed? I mean, I'm hoping that these are working together eventually. Has there been any crossover yet, or is that something that's a little further down the road?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, so there is cross-pollination happening. As you said, the Vision 43 project is going to get to the zoning code quicker than we are going to get to it with the waterfront plan. So I'm coordinating with the project team on Vision 43 to get involved in the design standards and setbacks and all that kind of good stuff that they're working through right now, and then hopefully be able to transition some of that language into whatever zoning we create for the waterfront district. So yeah, we're working together, but again, it's going to move a little faster than what we're going to move on the actual waterfront zoning changes.
No, that's excellent. Thank you, Darren.
I have a question, Chair.
Go, Councilperson Baumgartner.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks. I just was hearing you mention the Tualatin and Willamette River protectors. I'm not sure if that's the Riverkeeper groups. And I thought they were on this working group at one time. Am I misremembering that?
I think they
Are
were
they
on the
here?
original. Yes.
Yeah,
Are they here today?
you are correct. They are represented on the group, but I do not see Bob in the meeting. No.
Well, okay. I'm not sure who the current representative would be, but anyway, I guess if they're not here, when they're not here, is there a way for us, do we have a process by which we are directly following up with them? Because these are really important aspects to our plan, and maybe it's not, it's pretty early days, but I still want to kind of involve them in as early along as the process as possible. So I just wanted to put that out there. I also am wondering how our process with this working group has been different. It seems like, although I haven't really been involved with the Vision 43 directly, I hear about kind of secondhand about their coordinating efforts and their outreach. Are they similar the way we're conducting this working group? And if there's different aspects, is there going to be a way to have more outreach at some time? Because what I feel like is maybe we're not doing as much just open public outreach. I think surveys are great, but a lot of people, that's going to miss a lot of people.
Right.
This is a great question. So one, I will reach out to the river keepers to make sure that they have representation. The working group meetings are pretty consistent with Vision 43 as these meetings have been conducted. Review of materials, feedback, and then Angie is going to get to next steps. But we are going to have a few open houses this summer. Once we get everything wrapped up here, a few open houses for the community to come in, review everything, provide final comments before we start bringing it forward to the Planning Commission and City Council for review and potential adoption of the vision plan. So yeah, there is more outreach to come.
Great, thank you.
Can I jump in here? This is on the same topic that Councilperson Baumgartner just mentioned, and that is I reached out to the Willamette Riverkeeper Executive Director, who is named Heather King, and she started as Executive Director in the past few months, and asking her, I've kind of known her from her involvement. She was a former Riverkeeper employee, and then she left to another organization. Now she's back in the Executive Director role. And so I've reached out to her and asked her, kind of brought up to speed on this organization, where we are in the process, and asking does she want to be, how much involved do they want to be? And that they formerly, Travis and Bob were on this committee. So Darren, you're welcome to reach out directly to her if she doesn't respond to me. But anyways, if you go to their official website, you'll see her name is Heather King. And that would be the person that I would reach out to.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. That's great information.
And then I just had a quick other question. Was this document here, this Willamette River and Tualatin River protection, where would I be able to find that? Just so I could, this is the first time I've seen this list here with these sections, and could I go research that on my own? Where would I find that?
So that is that is in the community development code, Jeff. Willamette River protection, Willamette River Greenway is a statewide planning goal. So any jurisdiction that borders the Willamette River has to address the statewide planning goal. I believe it's planning goal 15. And so that's where this chapter came about, was implementing the administrative rules in the state's land use program to provide that protection of the Willamette River. And so anybody that does any development within the habitat areas within the protection area has to go through a permitting process with Westland Planning to ensure that they're meeting the goals of the statewide planning goals, and then the excuse me, and then the criteria in this chapter of the Community Development Code.
And to respond to the question of where do you find it, if you go to the city's website, on the left-hand side, second one down says city code and then community development code. And if you type in 28 or on the search, it'll pop right up.
Okay, thank you.
I also had
I'm
a
also-
question. Oh, go ahead.
I'm happy to drop the link in the chat if that's helpful also.
Perfect.
Great, thank you.
I also had a question about mixed use planning, zoning. It makes a lot of sense to me, but I also find myself wondering, like, what would prevent the kinds of activities that once resulted in efforts to really separate residential from industrial and commercial uses?
So it would be the as they say, the devil in the details, right? So as Angie was talking about, permitted uses, conditional uses, prohibited uses. So that will be what we'll work through when we get to the applying zoning, working with the community, doing outreach as to what types of uses we want to see, what types of uses we would not want to see in these areas, and again, being very specific in each of the zones. We've been discussing one size fits all might not work, right? So we might have to have little modified zones in different areas of the waterfront. So again, we'll work through that after we get through the vision plan, get it through adoption, and we'll pivot to actual zoning and code work.
So whatever is decided for the historic city hall zone would not necessarily be applied directly to the other two zones.
That's correct. Yeah, it would be used as a model, but then probably tweak it based on the environmental resources, access, proximity to other zones and uses. So yeah, it would all get worked out through a public engagement process again.
Good. Thanks.
Okay, so Darren, next steps.
Okay, so I know Darren talked a little bit about forthcoming engagement. I'm going to talk a little bit zoomed out for a moment. Vision plan, next steps. We did get, your feedback today. Seems like we have a few more comments to work through, but kind of on our way broadly. Next steps for that document is going to Planning Commission and City Council for final adoption. Again, the policy and regulatory recommendations memo, you all have that now. We're asking for your comments back by May 29th. So that's 3 weeks from today. TSP update. So this is an analysis we'll be working on over the next month or so, looking and comparing what's proposed in our vision plan to the current TSP and kind of flag any inconsistencies between them. So we'll also, with that review, be identifying streets, intersections, trails, bike and pedestrian facilities, any areas that might need further study in the TSP to further support what we're proposing in the vision plan. And we'll also be reviewing ODOT's updated guidelines and outlining next steps to align with transportation planning requirements in the future. So kind of keying up the city for any important updates. Concurrently, we're also going to be developing an implementation and financing plan. So our partners, Linn Consulting, who you've heard from at previous meetings, are really kind of spearheading this effort. They're going to be looking at a phased development strategy that really speaks to the market conditions analysis they already completed. They'll also be developing recommendations for public-private partnership strategies and IDing any additional funding tools for infrastructure projects. So with all that, at our next meeting, which is tentatively scheduled for July, you will be getting an update on those two relatively new work streams, the TSP update and the implementation and financing plan.
Okay, thank you. The next is public comment, and I have two people for public comment. The first is Jody Carson.
Hi there. Good afternoon. Thank you to the committee for having public comment on this. I have been involved on the periphery of this the whole time. I was involved in a prior visioning process when I was on city council, and I currently am on the boards of the Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area Coalition and the Advocates for the Heritage, Willamette Falls Heritage, as well as the Historic Main Street Board. And so all of those groups have a vested interest in seeing how this plan evolves. It's very important to all of us. I would like to sort of thank both Britta and Jim Edwards for their comments about the need to include or re-include in the plan something related to the importance of our industrial heritage and looking to reuse, repurpose, or somehow or another save that vision. And I hear the comments from Governor Brown and Councilwoman Baumgartner about the wants for the natural area. I spent many months taking tours of people down to the island and having them envision what they wanted to see down there. People really do want water access to the falls. People are very interested in the Native American history down there, but they are also very, very interested and very much like seeing the industrial heritage down there and are really impressed with what they see down there. And I think there are some ways to really utilize or repurpose buildings, maybe not save the whole building, but save parts of a building or save elements from the building so people can really get a sense of the industrial heritage that's so much the reason why Westland exists. I've visited many sites, I think probably all of you have. Spokane's riverfront, where they reuse parts of industrial buildings and some component parts of the equipment. Most recently, last year, I went to a conference in Birmingham, Alabama, and they saved a whole mill. I don't know, we can't do that, but they basically repurposed the building for some public venues, and they also interestingly enough, had a sculpture garden where they took a lot of the materials. I know PGE with Mill A has worked on saving a lot of the artifacts. We worked with them on a list of things that should be saved. Those things can be repurposed. They can be turned into a sculpture garden. We can have a walking trail with interpretation, but we need to not lose the focus of that historic preservation and trying to find a way to save what we can, repurpose what we can, and maybe interpret the other things in some kind of creative way. I do believe that if you don't put it back in the plan, it gets lost. I mean, I heard what James Manning said related to we have some of that in our historic preservation codes, but it's not really strong enough. We really need to include it back in the vision of this document that we're going to make those attempts. I don't know what that's going to look like. I look forward to our future planning efforts to define that, but I don't want to lose those focuses in this particular document. So thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Jody. And the next is Aurelia.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Aurelia Rohrabacher. I'm a West Linn resident, and I have been most of my life. I'm also a board member of the Advocates for Willamette Falls Heritage with Jody and Jim Edwards. So you probably can guess what I'm about to say, but without reiterating too much of what everyone else has just said, I'd like to say that I am also an architectural professional, and I have myself shepherded many adaptive reuse projects through planning and construction phases. And so I hear that specific mention to keeping adaptive reuse on the island was removed due to the complications of seismic upgrades and ADA compliance. And while that is definitely a reality, it doesn't prohibit it from being possible. And it's extremely important, as Jody mentioned, to add it back into the vision plan, because if it was just up to developers out of the goodness of their heart, they'll never save anything. So I would feel much more comfortable as a resident and architectural lover that more specific language was added back into the vision plan. I also have an opinion piece in the Tidings this week on this same topic. So for more information on my feelings on this subject, please feel free to read that, and I'd love to talk more about it if anyone else would like to reach out to me. But it's an issue very dear to my heart, and I would absolutely be devastated if the majority of those buildings were removed. And I also agree with Mary Baumgartner that public space and nature should be added back in, but I see a huge potential for everything to be possible. It's a huge space, and those buildings are a part of our city and our culture, and they deserve to be respected. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Chair, this is Kathy Halicki. I have a comment/question.
Okay, go ahead, Kathy.
And I was waiting till the end of the presentation to see if it was already addressed or not. So I apologize for taking us backwards. But on the density issues, I think it needs to be explained a little better and or more precise, because allegedly with this, let's say low density, you could put in 9 duplexes at 3,000 square feet and make them 3 stories tall. And to me, that's not a low density. What exactly are the criteria for low density? Is it size and height plus the numbers? You know, exactly how does this play out? That's my question, that probably for those of us that are not in the land use realm, we know nothing about, which is also going to probably be the majority of John Q. Public. So that to me needs to be spelled out a little better.
Andrew or Darren, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I'll take a stab at this. So what is allowed and not allowed is in the Community Development Code. So again, every property within the city has a zoning designation on it. So whatever that zoning designation is, the property owner has a right to develop under those rules. So for the vision plan, we're just identifying what we've heard from the community as what level of development they'd like to see in the 3 different areas. And so what we've heard again in the historic city hall district is, higher density development, which is that more than 30 units per acre, which is shown in the very end of the vision plan there. So again, when we go to write that code, that mixed use code, that's what we will be looking at, right? Is writing code that would allow 30 plus units per acre in that district. And then the other districts also have sort of a recommendation of the intensity of uses. And so again, when we would get to those those districts and do the zoning, we would be looking at writing code that would accommodate that level of development. And again, there will be outreach done as part of the code writing exercise and the rezoning of properties, at which point, we'll get more detail from the community on actually what they would like to see, because 10 to 30 units per acre is a pretty wide range. That's where we would start, and then we would hone in on exactly what the rules would allow on specific properties in the different districts. Does that answer your question, or does that make sense?
Yes, and thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Darren? So I have a comment that is related, unrelated with this. I was approached by someone from Channel 6, Coing 6, and they would like to get with somebody to put a camera up at the falls. And they were trying to do this with Grand Ronde, and that fell through. And then they tried to do it with Westland Paper Company, and with them going out of business, that fell through. Do we have any suggestions on that of how we could put I think for community outreach of what is happening down there and what is down there, to have it visual every day, a website you can log into, or it's part of their newscast or during their afternoon shows of different places in Oregon where they have these cameras. A lot of people don't even know the locks are there that live in this city. And, I've lived in this city my whole life. I'm 5th generation of my family in Westland, and they've all had some part down there at the mill or locks. And I think it'd be very important, as Adrian said, 221. Hey, that's pretty good over 6 weeks, which that is pretty good for somebody to log on and do. But there's a lot more than 221 people that have an opinion on this project or a vision of what they would like to see on this project, that live in the city or live in the area. And that might be a great way to, open people's eyes to what's happening there, or, what the falls really look like from a certain space on Moores Island. I don't know who this question is to, more of a comment, but it's something that I think
I'm happy.
It's Governor Brown. Yes.
Mr. Manning, we think that's a brilliant idea, if I may, Mr. Chair. We think it's a brilliant idea. We've had internal conversations about this. As you're probably aware, there's some ongoing litigation right now involving PGE in the
Yes.
state that is likely to be resolved in the next few weeks, but I don't know. And I assume the Department of Fish and Wildlife would want to be engaged in that conversation. But I'd love to follow up with you on that. I think there's an extraordinary opportunity here, and it would take all of the players engaged to figure that out. Obviously, as well as including consultation with the tribes. But we think it's a conversation worth having.
Thank you. I'll reach out to you and we could talk about this, because I've also talked to the VFW across the river, at post 1324, because that would be a great place for a camera also to see the whole area. But I'll touch base with you soon. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. If there's no other comments or any questions, we'd like to adjourn the meeting. It's 2:16 p.m. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your comments today, and this, great topic. I love this. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.